All right. Well, we'll go ahead and get started. Welcome, everyone, to the first In Conversation with Mozilla Leadership and students within Mozilla's HBCU and HSI Student Network. You all have received an exclusive invitation to join this conversation today. We'll be discussing a variety of topics ranging from career journeys to product development, ethical and tech, and everything in between. So, with that being said, again, we're really excited to have you here today. So I'll go ahead and introduce myself. So my name is Channing Bell, and I will be moderating today's conversation with Dave Camp, who is the Chief of Core Products here at Mozilla. So a little bit about me before we get to know Dave. I am a graduate of Hampton University. I don't know if we have anyone online from there, but go Pirates, with a degree in biology. I decided to transition from science to business post-graduation because I decided I didn't want to go to medical school. So after that, I moved to the Houston area, which is where I'm located now, and I began my career in the oil and gas industry, and I did that for about 10 years. So I started out as a business analyst and moved on to a product owner, and then fell in love and really stumbled across product management. So after being in the oil and gas industry, as I mentioned, for about 10 years, I decided that I needed a change. I needed something different. And then I applied to Mozilla, and here I am now. So I am currently the product manager for Firefox Focus, which is our privacy mobile app. So I'm curious to know where you all are from. So if you don't mind, just go ahead and type in the chat and let us all know where you're joining from. Any other Hamptonians out there? Yay, Malia, go Hampton. Okay, Virginia State. Denise is from Virginia State. Anyone else? I see a couple from Virginia State. Okay, quite a few. A lot of folks from Virginia State. Okay, very cool. Yes, we're definitely VSU strong. All right. Well, that's great. So a lot of folks from Virginia. So thank you for joining. So now I'm going to introduce Dave. So now a little bit about our guest of the hour, Dave Camp. He is Chief of Core Products here at Mozilla, and is responsible for managing the overall development of products such as Firefox, Hubs, Pocket, and our privacy and security focused projects. Before assuming this position, he was the Chief of Firefox products, and before that, VP of Engineering of Firefox, where he led a global team of engineers that was responsible for building, testing, and shipping the Firefox family of products and services. Before that, he was responsible for all of product management, engineering, technology, and operations in support of Firefox products, services, and web platform. So Dave lives in the outskirts of Portland with his wife and 2 kids, and he plays heavy metal. So hopefully he'll be able to share a little bit more about that hobby with us later on in the conversation. So we're going to go ahead and get started. And the first, like I said, we're going to touch a variety of topics today. The first thing that we're going to talk about is getting into tech with different backgrounds. So Dave, many people enter into tech with various backgrounds. For me, I have a non-traditional background with a degree in biology. And like I mentioned earlier, I had all the intentions of going to medical school, but I ended up in product management. So if you don't mind, tell us a little bit about your career journey and what aspects of it were unexpected or would you consider non-traditional?
Sure. Yeah. First of all, good morning or afternoon to everyone. I love to tell the story of how the moment I think of as like the beginning of my career. I was in college. It was my first year, maybe second year. I forget exactly when this happened. I think it was the second year, and I always knew I wanted to be an engineer. Like that was software engineer was, I knew that from the very, very beginning. And like from the moment I saw a computer, basically. Sometime my second year of college, I was really excited about the open source movement. I was interested in it. I was following it, and there was one project. It was called GNOME, and it was sort of a collection of projects. And I like tried to pitch in to help them. Didn't do a great job. But then I accidentally committed one of my project, like hobby, like trying to learn projects, to their main source repository, and I was mortified. I was like, I am such an idiot. That was supposed to be like my private little learning project, and these like serious people are getting distracted by my little project. So I totally mortified. I emailed the person who ran the project, Miguel de Acaza, and I said, like, man, I am so sorry. Like I'm an idiot. Like, can you please just delete that and forget that ever happened, and I'll go on my way and you'll never have to see me again. And he responded like, well, and he didn't know me from anyone. Like we'd never met before. He didn't know anything. All he knew about me was that I was careless, apparently. And he's like, I could delete that project for you, but why don't you just come join us instead? And then you can work on the project here. And I actually know another guy named JP who's working on some similar stuff. And so that like one act of somebody like taking a chance on a provably dumb kid, like had a pretty big impact on my career. I started working on that project a couple years later, a year or two later. I dropped out of school to go join Miguel at the company he had started with another guy, Nat, and kind of went from there. So yeah, it was kind of an awkward start to a career, but it was fun. And it, like I said, the power of taking a chance on people, like I try and pay that forward when I can, because it was pretty impactful for me.
Very cool. Very interesting. It's always interesting to hear about how people got into what they're doing now. And a lot of times I meet people who start out doing one thing and then do something else, or they were presented with an amazing opportunity and they just decided to go with it. So was being in tech, being a developer, was that something that you always set out to do, like since you were a young kid, or was this something that you kind of got interested in a little bit later on?
Like the technology stuff very early on. I think I was 12 when I first started like wanting to program. The management side of it, the leadership side, definitely unexpected. Like I was one of those like diehard, I will be an engineer, managers are jerks and I don't like them and I'm never going to be a manager, like never going to be a leader. So that part was totally unexpected. That was not only unexpected, but sworn off early in my career, but then I changed my mind and here we are. So yeah.
Was there anything in particular that made you change your mind to get into management? Since you had that view about, engineering managers before that?
Yeah. I kept having opinions on how the managers could be better. And then a wise leader sort of said, okay, put your money where your mouth is then and stop just complaining and do something about it. And I did, and it turns out I wasn't terrible at it. So yeah, it was kind of a good kick in the right direction. I also just kind of got older and got over myself, which was important for that particular transition.
Cool. Yeah, I found in my experience that some of my best managers that I've had didn't want to be managers. So I'm like, you're perfect for this. You didn't want to do this, but you're the best manager ever. So that's great. So we'll move on to the next topic. So let's talk a little bit about ethics in computing. So we know that this has been a pretty big topic lately, whether that be being transparent about privacy or data collection policies, or just being thoughtful about what you're giving space to on the web, such as accurate news and not just clickbait. So what advice would you give to the students we have joining today, or just students in general, about as they're starting their careers and thinking about ethical computing?
Yeah, first of all, it's a fun field. There's a lot that you can do there. I would say The thing I try and focus on, and I would recommend other people focus on, is there are a lot of different branches of ethical tech, a lot of different ways people think about it, a lot of different ways people are trying to make a positive impact. Pretty easy to get in that situation where I know there's like a name for it, but I don't really know the name, where you're like harder on your friends than you are on your enemies. And I think there's a decent chunk of that in like the sort of ethical tech circles, where people are nitpicking the other people trying to do good instead of focusing on like just doing the good. So I would say like there's spend time learning what you care about and what you think is really important, and then focus on what impact you and the people you're working with can have. The more focus you have on your own impact, the more likely I've found it you are to actually have some impact. Some of the louder folks who tend to focus on like correcting other ethical tech projects don't seem to get as far with getting anything done. So yeah, I would say, like I said, it's a fun field. It's worth it. I'm really glad that there seems to be, it's a field you can really make a living in these days. It's gaining steam, so it's fun. But yeah, focus on what you want to get done, and don't worry so much about what the other folks are trying to get done. Seems to be pretty helpful.
All right, so we'll move on to the next question. So we know that HBCUs produce about 27% of African American students with bachelor's degrees in STEM fields and 42% of Black engineers. Additionally, we know that 14% of STEM degrees are confirmed to Hispanic students. Despite these numbers, minorities are still not represented with the same percentages in tech when it comes to other races. So with that said, what is the importance of diversity in tech, from the people to the products that Mozilla develops?
Sure. So we kind of have a couple different answers to that, but I think the sort of dry answer is, every study shows that diverse teams are more creative, more productive, et cetera. I think, have you ever had that experience where like you learn something about someone's background that just makes everything about them click? Like you didn't like they were like, there's something like you never agreed and never made nothing they said ever made sense, but then you kind of learn something about their background, and then everything about them clicks, and you kind of and you're able to learn more. And like I love that moment, and I think like the more backgrounds you get in the room, the more likely you are to have those like weird, challenging discussions that end up making everyone better. So I think that's kind of a core useful part. I also think like, the question sometimes gets framed as like, why should there be diversity in tech? But I think like there's a thing called a code smell in engineering, which is like something's wrong, something's wrong, and it's not what you're seeing there. Like it's and I think if diversity in tech it seems like it should be the default, and if that's not happening, you probably have a lot wrong under the surface that you're not recognizing, because it's just kind of right. And so I think it's just important to do the right thing and get people where they should be. And if you solve those problems, it's better for everyone. So yeah.
Now I know for me, because I've been in the oil and gas tech industry, software, SaaS products, B2B, B2C for almost a decade now. And oftentimes for me, I'll be the only one in the room or the only one at the table, or just me and another person. And then there are certain things that, you would think when you're developing products that would be kind of like, this is like a dust situation. Like we got to do this. But oftentimes if you don't have diverse people at the table, whether it's diversity in ethnicity or diversity in thought, a lot of the simple things that when the consumer goes to use the product, that you might not have thought about before, it's like you can kind of bring that to the table in the beginning. So I think it's really important. And I think from my experience so far being at Mozilla, not even a year yet, I think we're doing Mozilla, leadership is doing a great job of recognizing that, diversity is important, right? And having different people at the table to be able to make better products. So I've really appreciated that being here.
Yeah, I think it's fun. It's good. It's a good
Yeah.
thing.
Yeah. So we'll switch gears a little bit even more. And so we know that, or we've heard that you have several hobbies. What is your oldest and your newest hobby?
Oldest hobby would probably be like drawing, mostly comic book characters. That's like from high school or junior high. I think I started doodling because I was bored in class. And so that's probably my oldest. My newest is probably like so training for powerlifting. I started doing just some like weightlifting and stuff for health, and then I realized I actually kind of enjoyed it, so I started pushing pretty hard on that. So yeah, that's my earliest and latest.
Okay. Which, if any, is the most challenging, and which one is do you do the most leisurely?
That's a good question. I'd say the powerlifting is an interesting kind of hard. That every other hobby I have, if I'm not feeling it, I put it down and I'm fine, and I can go. I go 2 months without drawing, and when I pick it back up, I'll be about as good as I was when I put it down, and I'll get a little better. But the lifting stuff, man, you got to do it every session. You really can't put it down, and that's been a new thing. As far as leisurely, the guitar is like I can zone out for hours just goofing off with that.
Yeah, we see your guitars on your back wall. Do you want to tell us about those just for a little bit?
Yeah,
it's a great conversation piece, by the way.
All right, so this is my this is my workhorse. I do like 80% of my playing on that one because it's just versatile and simple and good. This is like a project guitar. I've like changed a bunch of things on it. That's just to kind of learn more about the internals. It's still fun to play. But it's really heavy. It's scary. The acoustic is my acoustic. I love the acoustic. And then so I used to be like, as you can see, I bought a bunch of them, and it was right around when I got right before I got married. I was buying a bunch of guitars, and then I kind of like that need was sated. I didn't need it. I felt good. I basically got this one, and then like that's it. I'm done. But then like 10, 15 years later, however long it's been, my wife was like, you should get you've earned a guitar. You should get a guitar. And so I decided to get the most like cheesy heavy metal, like flying V, like whammy bar, ridiculous thing I could get. So I have a lot of fun with that one too.
Cool. Very cool. I played the piano when I was younger. I wish there was space in my house to have one now, but it's at my parents' house. But whenever I go home, I try to play a little bit. So yeah, music is a good stress reliever for me, at least. It sounds like that might be that way for you as well.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, work-life balance is so important. And I know, the saying, some people live to work and other people work to live. So can you kind of tell us about how you balance that a little bit, being in tech, which is a pretty, demanding industry, and I guess tie that to, why it's important for you to make time for your hobbies?
Yeah. I'll say I have not solved that problem for myself. Like it's, when I was younger, I was a like brutal overworker. Like it was not good. And it didn't make me any better, I don't think. Like I don't in retrospect, if I just slept a little, I would have gotten things done faster. But anyway, I do the part of why I have these hobbies is it is like this. It forces me to think about something different. When I first started managing people, was the moment I became the best developer I had been in my career. Like, which I did not expect. I expected the minute I got distracted by management, I would never be a good developer ever again. But as it turned out, just distracting, because my main job became managing people, I was only programming on my, like when I didn't have anything else to do. And I was only programming when I really knew what to do. And so like that, I found that being able to take that brain break from a given problem made me so much better at solving problems. And so I make time for the hobbies because I am smarter when I spend some of my brain power on things other than work. And not to mention, like if you're careful about it, if you try, the lessons you learn in anything can be applied to anything. Like my dumb example is Mozilla has a history of sort of designing everything ourselves from first principles instead of actually going out and sort of looking at what other people do and then adapting it. And while I was trying to learn music, I came across so many examples of like all the people that you think are making it up as they go along know it so well, and then they do things that are experimental. And so like those little lessons like that they apply across, and I find it pretty valuable to have those different perspectives.
Just out of curiosity, do you develop in your spare time? I mean, I know you're busy with being chief of core products, but do you ever kind of get a little tickle to go back in the code a little bit? And
all the time. Yeah, I work on like video games for fun. Like I program video games for fun just because I like programming is my one true calling. Like the management stuff, I enjoy it. I think I'm okay at it, but the thing I love is programming. So yeah, I make time for it all the time, pretty regularly. And so like I have this one video game that its only design principle is like whatever my kids say I should put in it, I try and put in it. So you can fight like robot flowers because my son thought robot flowers were a thing you should be able to fight. So yeah, it's program all the time. Still love it.
Okay, nice. All right, well, we'll move on to the next segment of our conversation. So now we'll use the rest of the time to answer questions that have been submitted by you students. So starting with students from the Mozilla HBCU Collaborative Curriculum Program. So we did receive a couple of pre-submitted questions. And so we'll go ahead and start with those. So this question comes from Xavier, who is a student at Virginia State University, class of 2023, and he is a computer science major. And his question is, what about Mozilla made you decide that this is the place for you?
That's a great question. At first, the first time I actually joined Mozilla twice. I left for a little while. It was, and it still is about like, not a lot of, I don't want to work for a big company. I don't like big companies. I like small groups of people, or relatively small groups of people getting stuff done. And as far as the overlap of like being ethical, like I said, I came from an open source background. I cared a lot about that sort of thing. And Mozilla was the best mix of like a small team having a large impact in an ethical way. So, to some extent that same thing has stuck with me it's been 15 years since I first joined. So the fact that it's still true is pretty incredible.
Yeah. Maybe I'll have the opportunity to stay for 15 years. We'll see. Let me get through year one first.
Well, I only made it 2 years and then I quit.
Okay.
And 2 more years somewhere else, and then I came back. So it's been 10 years since I came back.
Okay.
But yeah.
Okay.
I'll be credit for the full 15.
Well, we do have people that have been here for 15 plus years. So I think it's a testament to, the company and, that people who work here really believe in Mozilla's mission. So
yeah.
You have some definitely very loyal Mozillians, to say the least. Okay. So next question comes from Clifton. He is also a student at Virginia State University, class of 2022, and is a computer science major. And his question is, what can I do to work at Mozilla, or what steps should I take to work at Mozilla?
Sure. So, get really good at your discipline. That's the first thing I suggest. Like we need all sorts of disciplines here. I don't know. Actually, like it would be interesting. Is everyone in the like? What are people learning right now? Is this mostly engineering? Is it product? Like, I'd be curious to hear, like in the chat, what people are studying. But getting really good at your craft, very important. We've paused our like internship programs during COVID. We didn't have the right setup to host and make that successful. But if you're part of our collaborative curriculum program, be sure to take advantage of the one-on-one sessions with our technical recruiter. And I think you'll all get an invitation to a private LinkedIn group. So certainly take advantage of that. And we'll be flagging job opportunities and stuff there. But generally, work hard, get your skills and your discipline up, and apply when you see a job opportunity that's interesting to you.
Okay, great. Next question. What are the biggest challenges that you see in tech within the next 5 years? And also, where do you see Mozilla helping to meet those challenges?
Yeah, I think the two things that I'm most concerned about as far as tech challenges are, and especially in combination of trust and centralization, right? Being able to create an internet experience that a user can feel safe in, trust to be in their best interest. It's hard, and there's sort of two actors that you need to worry about. One are the like independent bad actors, so things like hackers, scammers, all that garbage. And then I think there's just the trust deficit with big tech in general, and not being or maybe being clear what their motives are, and so I think tech. Tech has sprinted really fast towards some things that provide some good experiences, some bad experiences, but it's hard to know what to trust. So I think solving that's going to be difficult. I think centralization is this is where it gets tough, and this is where I think Mozilla needs to be spending some of its time. Like centralization gives kind of the easiest tools for solving some of the trust problems, but clearly some of the centralization in platforms like Facebook are contributing to some of the trust problems. So how we figure out how to generate trust while not amassing just massive amounts of power to a few individual companies is going to be pretty difficult. Mozilla's doing over the next couple of years to try and address that is to spend more time helping guide people through the internet towards the more healthy parts of it, away from the less healthy parts of it, provide alternatives in areas where we are set up to do that, and advocate for users in that general area. So yeah, trust and centralization, and the fact that they're both hard, they're independently difficult to solve, but even tougher to solve when combined with each other.
Yeah, trust is definitely an issue among consumers. I mean, we see that a lot lately with even, in the US, the government, being involved in, different hearings and briefings, wondering like, what are you doing with our data, or whatever that cause might be. So, I mean, do you think that, big tech can come together and spearhead a change and say, look, I know this was our reputation in the past, but this is what we're doing now. We've kind of all come together collaboratively. And this is kind of how we want to be perceived in the future?
I don't think it's impossible. I think, where I have a bit of hope that the the market will demand more and that will have some impacts. You're not going to get over the fact that like these companies weren't really formed to be your friend, and they're like they have profit motives that they're going to have a very, very hard time giving up. So I would I have some hope that there will be incremental change in as like users demand more from their providers. I don't think there will be an overnight true fix. So I think it's good. It's a little both.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
So kind of piggybacking on that a little bit, how is Mozilla keeping the internet safe and accessible for diverse communities?
Yeah, so historically speaking, I mentioned the two kinds of bad actors, the sort of individual scammers and the sort of systemic ones. Right now, Mozilla is focused primarily on in the safety realm. We're focused primarily on security, which is just like making sure that like hackers can't actually break your computer. That's something like Firefox has been dedicated to security of that sort forever. It's one of our core competencies. From a privacy point of view, we've been focused primarily on privacy from big tech and certain kinds of bad actors, like people that run people that spy on ISP. Basically, we've been focused very much on like communication security and privacy from like the big algorithms and stuff. As we evolve over the next few years, I think we're going to need to move up the stack from just kind of fixing the baseline, like tracking by ad networks and that sort of thing, and up to some of the more challenging parts of keeping the internet safe. Things like you're helping you control your online presence and protecting from like the sort of masses of harassing jerks, et cetera, and the sort of more targeted attacks that we see happening disproportionately with marginalized communities and diverse communities. So still working to figure out what that is, but yeah. Good.
All right. So now what we'll do, we'll pivot a little bit and take some live questions. So students, if you have any questions, please go ahead and put those, or actually we'll have you ask those questions live to Dave and he can answer them. So go ahead and if you would please use the raise your hand feature, and I will call on you and you can ask those questions. If there are any. So while we're waiting on questions, Dave, if you don't mind, I'm curious, what resources do you typically use to grow your thinking around leadership and strategy, or just tech in general? And those resources could be books, podcasts, articles, or whatever that might be.
Sure. I am very undisciplined about that, so I'll but hard to say that I have like a clear routine. As far as books that have really helped me through my career, there's one, it's actually just a psychology book, or a social science book of some sort. I think, I forget what he calls it. It's called Thinking Fast and Slow. It's about how people process information, and the core insight that I've just found super valuable is that like basically people have two ways of thinking. One is the sort of just going with their gut, and that is a much faster and much less accurate way of thinking. and then they have one where they sit down and process, but it's actually very hard to get into that mode where you're actually really thinking. And so it did two things. First, it helped me identify those differences, and it built a lot of empathy. Like, I was a total jerk kid, and I thought like everyone else was an idiot and I was smart. And I think that book helped me realize, no, like we're all just idiots, unless we put specific effort into thinking about things. And it's not the nicest way to put it, but again, I was a jerk 22-year-old. So yeah. That was good. Sorry. There's a book called Good Strategy, Bad Strategy. Great book. I would definitely recommend that. As far as keeping, like learning about like new business concepts, I love the HBR 10 Best Reads series. Those are good. As far as keeping like more abreast of news, I generally just follow a bunch of people on Twitter and hope they retweet good articles to me.
Anybody you recommend to follow on Twitter?
My favorite person to follow on Twitter is probably, this isn't so much news as like I learn a lot about management and some other topics. A guy named Marco Rogers, Polytech. Probably my favorite Twitter account. Otherwise, I mostly just follow my friends.
There's nothing wrong with that.
That could be a bit of a bubble, but yeah.
Okay, very cool. I think okay, so we have a question from Kertrell Trot. He wants to know, do you find any negatives with managing relatively smaller teams?
No, I think managing small teams is awesome. I think it's fun. I think it's a good step in your career. I think the only negative is like at scale, like if everyone is managing really small teams, communication can get a little more difficult. I tend to use the like 7 ± 2 rule of thumb, that like a good manager can keep good track of 5 to 9 people in a way that really helps that person grow their career. I am not a fan of the sort of like 20-person management teams. I think it's difficult for each individual to get what they need from their manager at that point. But I think small teams are a good stepping stone to that more sort of 5 to 7 person team thing. Yeah. Managing small teams is fun. It's great. Best time of my life is managing a small team.
Do you find smaller teams, because they are smaller, to be more efficient in the work that they deliver versus having larger teams?
Yeah. So there's an old rule of thumb that like the difficulty of communication scales with the number of connections, not with the number of people. So if you have 2 people, there's 1 connection. If you have 3 people, there's 3 connection, and like so it grows sort of exponentially. So the way I tend to think about it is, you want your team to be as small as it can be. And there are big problems, and big problems need big teams, and that's okay. But if you can get away with a small team on a problem, it'll be better than a big team. So yeah, I like small teams. Again, there are big problems. Sometimes big problems need bigger teams to get them done, but
yeah. Okay, well, thank you, Kertrell. That was a great question. Please continue to type in the chat if there are any other questions that you all have. Speaking of teams and working together, how do you typically encourage creativity on your team, and challenging people to think outside the box and to come up with innovative solutions? How do you typically go about that?
My best tool for that is I work with some pretty darn creative people, so I don't. It's not the hardest job in the world, but being like, I try to be wrong first. Like I try and like I found in general that the biggest inhibitor to creative people is being worried about that they're wrong around other people. And so I just make sure that I'm wrong first and set the like basic tone that like being wrong is fine. And, try and let myself be corrected quickly. And sort of an old truism, at least in our team, that nothing gets to the right answer like the wrong one. And so, yeah, that is probably my most common tactic, is to just be really wrong a few times, and then magic happens.
Is there any career advice that you would have given to your 22-year-old self? Because I know, when I was just graduating from college, I put so much pressure on myself to, get a job right out and get right into everything and, go above and beyond and not do anything wrong. Don't make mistakes, and I think you put a lot of pressure, on yourself, or at least I did. I feel like I put a lot less now that I'm a little bit older, but what career advice would you give to your younger self?
Very like two things. First, like I said, I was a bit of a jerk when I was a kid. And so like get over yourself would probably be my first, like, just, be better. But what you said about like putting so much pressure on yourself, I mentioned I left Mozilla early on in my career, and I left for a lot of reasons, but the main one was that I was so concerned about being like really good and never screwing up and never making a mistake. And when I got to Mozilla, it was impossible to never make a mistake. There were so many hard problems here. Everyone was making some mistakes, and it stressed me out to no end. Like I was losing sleep. It was like unhealthy levels of stress that I was putting myself through. And so I left, and then but when I came back, I sort of promised myself, it sort of ties to that, like try and be wrong first. I was like, I'm just gonna like I was really scared people would find out I was wrong. And I said, like, I'm just gonna make sure everyone knows when I'm wrong. And then I'll never have that stress that somebody might find out that I did something wrong. And so I came back with that mindset of just like, make your mistakes, deal with it, learn from them. And it ended up serving me really well. So yeah, get over yourself would probably be the number one, because trying to be perfect just doesn't work. So,
Okay. Is there a leader or anyone that you admire or kind of view as a role model, whether, they don't have to be in tech, but just in general? And then I'm curious to know, like, why are they your role model? What about them inspires you?
Sure. I have a bit of a hang up about the whole idea of role models, because like they always disappoint. Like nobody's perfect, right? And nobody's me, and so nobody's gonna be able to sort of show me how to be me. But I'll say, so first of all, like the only exception to that is like I know my dad pretty darn well, and given that my background is being raised by him, I actually can kind of be a lot like him. And he so I learned from him most of all is like to sort of stick to your guns as far as like ethics and honesty. Like he worked in an industry where a lot of not scammers, but like a lot of sort of unethical people were making a lot more money than he was. But he just, he stuck to his guns and was willing to take a few hits to always be honest. And I thought that was, I learned a lot from that. That guy, Miguel de Casa I was telling you about, like that willingness to take a chance on people was hugely impactful on me. And I think, so in that aspect, he's a role model of mine. A guy named Jonathan Nightingale. I told you about the guy who said, well, like, stop complaining about bad managers and start being a good one. That was Jonathan Nightingale. He was, and he was sort of the person who helped me learn that management was a like valuable skill that contributes to an organization and not just like a way for old programmers to stay relevant. So he's a role model as far as I was concerned. And then, I had a peer here, Roxy Wen, who was our CFO, and similarly, like, whereas my dad sort of taught me, showed me like some honesty and integrity in a, sort of in one set of industries. Roxy was helped model that in industries that I'm actually working in. So that was pretty bad. So I'd say those folks.
And kind of going back to, being a manager and leader, how do you think about empathy and vulnerability as a leader?
I still haven't quite, like I said, I promised myself when I rejoined Mozilla that I was gonna like never hide a screw up and never like never apologize for screw ups, or not apologize for screw ups, you know what I mean, but never feel bad about an honest mistake. Never don't hide from mistakes. So for me, the vulnerability is pretty important. I don't know, it works for me. You have to ask the people that I lead whether it's effective. I don't know, but for me, it's important. I think it leads to trust. If you, like, everybody screws up, and if you probably all worked or met or known someone who will never admit that they don't know something, and it doesn't engender trust. And good leadership is about trust. So I think that's pretty important. As far as empathy, that's like I don't see how you do the job without it. I really don't. It's and when I say the job, I mean like any job.
Yeah.
So much energy wasted by like not taking a minute to think about what the other person might be going through. And so I don't always succeed, but I try and find, try and be, every ounce of energy I put into developing empathy is a good investment.
Very good, very good. So we'll close out with this final question. I know you talked about a few of your hobbies, whether that's the guitar or weightlifting, or drawing. So if you weren't in tech and you could do anything in the world, what would you be doing?
That's a good question. I don't know. I really, tech's all I really know. I would like to do art, but I'm so, like I said, it was my first hobby, but it's still the one I'm worst at. Like I still can't, there's something, my brain does not process things, the visual things somehow. I stubbornly, 25 years after starting, continue to try to be good at it, but I'm really bad at it. So I can't say I do that. I would love to be in a, well, I'm actually probably too old to say I'd love to be in a touring metal band. I used to say that, but no, I think I'd be tired. So I don't have a good answer. I love tech. I'd be interested in switching to different types of tech, but no, I can't. I don't have a good answer. What about you? Do you have a good answer for that?
Oh man, I love fashion, so I would probably maybe move to Paris and become like a fashion designer or something like that. But I love tech too. Fashion is just a passion of mine, on the side. So yeah, probably would definitely be doing something like that.
Awesome.
Who knows? Maybe one day, maybe down the road, we'll see. We'll see.
Awesome.
Yeah. All right. Well, I really enjoyed this conversation today, and I hope all the students did. And thank you all so much for joining. I want to give a special thank you to Dave Camp for spending some time with us. We hope you enjoyed our conversation, and we look forward to seeing you at a future event. Take care, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye.
Good one.